The Miramar Air Show canceled at the last minute because of the government shutdown. And federal workers in San Diego say they want to get back on the job. Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the latest on the shutdown and a police lockdown on Capitol Hill.
I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, Councilman David Alvarez joins us for the first in our in-depth series of interviews with San Diego's top mayoral candidates. Plus, the link between peace and prosperity is the focus of a three-day summit in San Diego, the cost of violence on the economy, and how businesses are key to the peace process.
And we'll have a look at how one South Bay community is keeping a promise to help more children get to college. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Day 3 of the partial government shutdown, and it's canceled the Miramar Air Show one day before it was supposed to open. Other developments in the shutdown: federal workers protested outside the federal building in downtown San Diego. And in Washington, no movement inside the Capitol, but a big scare outside the Senate office building. But we began first with the air show cancellation at San Diego's Miramar. The Deputy Secretary of Defense says it's a non-accepted activity, so the 58th annual air show is off, canceled one day before it was supposed to open. Now, word came even as ground displays were set up. The show had been scaled back already to just 2 days because of budget sequestration cuts earlier this year.
From the bottom of my heart, I apologize to San Diego for having to stand here today and make this statement. But as events have unfolded, it just is the way that it is. We'll work through this. I cannot thank the community enough for their support.
The cancellation will be costly. The Marine Corps will have to reimburse vendors and performers who would lose money because of the cancellation. Now, last year's show earned $1.6 million. That money went to family programs on base. No work and no pay for thousands of federal workers here in San Diego. A group from the National Treasury Employees Union spoke out downtown. That union represents more than 25 different federal agencies, including IRS workers. They say they're struggling without their paychecks and want to go back to work doing things like answering taxpayer questions and monitoring for fraud.
The IRS had to effectively stop collection activities and curtail audits, as well as its effort to combat fraud, such as identity theft and hiding of taxable funds in offshore accounts. So if you're a tax cheat, rejoice. We're not out there. This shutdown is the latest in a series of actions undermining the IRS's ability to do its job.
Now, he went on to blame the shutdown on House Speaker John Boehner and the Republicans in Congress. And President Obama says Boehner is the only thing preventing a vote on a budget bill to end the debate. He says if Boehner would let a vote happen and every Congress member voted their conscience, the shutdown would end today. Obama says he wants Congress to simply vote.
So pass a budget, end the government shutdown, pay our bills, prevent an economic shutdown. Just vote and end this shutdown, and you should do it today so we can get back to growing this economy, creating jobs, and strengthening our middle class.
Now, for his part, Speaker Boehner says the president is being inflexible, trying to steamroll ahead with the Affordable Care Act. He says if the president would negotiate to fix flaws in the health care law, the shutdown would end. Of course, you can find the latest on the government shutdown and debate at kpbs.org. On to the other big story tonight out of Capitol Hill. It was put on lockdown for a while this morning after a woman tried to drive through a barricade at the White House. She led police on a chase toward the Capitol. That's where officers shot and killed her. San Diego Congressman Juan Vargas says he heard the gunfire, but at first thought it was a car backfiring.
And then a police officer comes charging towards me, yelling to stop, stop, and stop. And then as he got closer, he said, are you a member of Congress? And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you have any identification? I said, yeah, I do. And so I gave him my identification. He goes, take your pin off. He goes, take your pin off because you could be a target.
Now, police say the woman had a toddler in the car. The child was not hurt. A police officer and a security agent were injured. Police say it seems to be an isolated incident with no connection to terrorism. San Diego's special election for mayor less than 2 months away, and a new forecast predicts less than half of the city's registered voters will cast a ballot. Researchers at National University analyzed previous elections and based on those numbers say only 46% of voters will turn out. Absentee ballots are expected to play a big role, but Latinos and young voters are not. The report also says special elections favor Republican candidates because GOP voters are often more likely to vote. Tonight, we begin a series of interviews with top mayoral candidates. Peggy Pico talks with San Diego council member and candidate David Alvarez.
11 candidates are vying to replace former Mayor Bob Filner to serve the remaining 3 years of his term. Among them, 4 candidates have above 10% voter support, according to a recent poll by our media partner 10 News. Each of the top 4 candidates will join us for a one-on-one interview starting tonight with Councilman David Alvarez. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Councilman Alvarez, you grew up in Barrio Logan. This is your first term on the City Council representing District 8 since 2010. You've been endorsed by a number of notable organizations, including the Democratic Party of San Diego and the Labor Council of San Diego and Imperial Counties. If elected mayor, what will your top 3 priorities be?
Well, again, thank you for having me, and the endorsements are great, including others like Councilwoman Donna Fry and Assembly Majority Leader Tony Atkins. But I'm proud to be a native San Diegan, and I'm running for mayor because we really need to make sure that the city prioritizes neighborhoods first. It's been my motto since I ran for city council. I'm a neighborhood activist first, and then I became a politician, and that's my main priority. Making sure that infrastructure needs are met in the city would be second. And I think that third, we need to ensure that there's economic development and prosperity for our city. So that means creating jobs, but also that means investing in neighborhoods where there's high level unemployment and low income communities, and making sure that we put the funds necessary in the communities that really need them so that we can all thrive as a city.
Moving on to the Convention Center, the Coastal Commission staff opposes the Convention Center expansion, which I believe you originally supported. Do you still support it? And what do you think about the Chargers' plan for a multi-use stadium complex in that area?
Well, first of all, the Chargers' plan I think is very interesting. I've never had the opportunity to actually sit down with the Chargers to learn about that, but I will in the next few days. And so I don't understand completely what that plan is, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that and review it. I'm always open to good suggestions, and hopefully this will be one. As far as the convention center goes, the Coastal Commission is putting forward an addendum saying that we need to build a bridge which will cost somewhere in the magnitude of $50 million. The city taxpayers are already on the hook. I oppose the financing scheme that went forward for this convention center. I believe the expansion is necessary. We need more convention space, but not by putting more taxpayer dollars to the project.
When it comes to San Diego's homeless, it was a top priority for the former mayor. Do you support funding to keep the temporary shelter open right now year-round?
Well, we voted for that on the council to support that, and that was our hope. Unfortunately, it seems like the numbers were incorrect, and we're going to be discussing this in the committee that I serve on, the budget committee, in the next month to figure out where our finances are, to make sure that we're going to have enough resources to cover all of those expenses that were anticipated, and we'll be discussing that there. I support the shelter. I voted for it to be open year-round, and if we can continue to keep it open year-round, we'll do that.
Would you be willing to ask funding from taxpayers, or where would that source of money
No, we'd have to
from?
find that source of funding from within our existing budget, and we've done some really good things to cut back on our budget, so we're in a good position. Hopefully we'll have enough funding to do those programs that are so important.
I knew when the budget was being discussed, a lot of San Diegans were asking for a whole lot in city services. Do taxes need to be raised to help pay for that?
I think we saw this year that we could provide a lot of services that San Diegans want. I think where we're going to have to start to have a discussion on, though, is not using general fund dollars, which is what pays for all these services that San Diegans want, to fund all of our infrastructure needs in our city. And so we're going to have to focus on that in a separate manner, and we'll have to have a longer discussion about that.
When you declared your candidacy, a high-profile Democrat candidate, Nathan Fletcher, was already running. How do you respond to critics who say that because you're running now, you're going to split the vote?
Oh, I would just say that there was a democratic process opposed to the Republicans who all got into a room in a backroom deal fashion and selected who their candidate was going to be. The Democrats had a process, and the Democratic Party voted, and they voted to support me as their candidate. I am the Democratic voice, the Democratic elected official who's being supported by the Democratic Party.
If you were elected San Diego's mayor, you'd be the first Latino mayor here. How do you feel about that?
It'd be an honor to serve as mayor in the city that I love, that I grew up in. And obviously, that'll be a different distinction. That would be a great distinction as well. But really, this is about all of San Diego, every single neighborhood that's been so left behind, so neglected. And I've witnessed that growing up here, and I want to make sure that every community is treated well and treated to the greatness that our city can be.
All right, mayoral candidate and Councilman David Alvarez, thank you.
Thank you.
Alvarez and other candidates will join us on Monday, October 14th for a KPBS News special, The Mayor's Race. Hope you'll join us. It's a debate at 5 right here on KPBS TV. The battle over a Barrio Logan community plan continues as the shipbuilding industry gathers signatures for a referendum, but KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirk says there still may be room for a compromise.
Standing in front of giant ships surrounded by dock workers, maritime industry leaders said the Barrio Logan community plan would signal a death knell for a working waterfront, taking with it Navy contracts and solid working class jobs. The sticking point is a few square blocks where new shipbuilding supply companies would need to obtain a permit to set up shop. They say the permitting process would cripple them. Community activists who favor the plan say it would just provide oversight to prevent any companies from polluting the community. City Council member Kevin Faulkner says the port must be protected.
I believe most San Diegans agree that our city cannot afford to lose these jobs, which is why I will continue to work with my city council colleagues to reach a solution that provides certainty for San Diego's maritime industry. And if a solution cannot be reached at City Hall, and I'm hopeful that it will be, this effort will allow San Diegans to have the final say at the ballot box.
The shipbuilding industry will have to gather 50,000 signatures in the next 30 days to get the issue on the ballot. Meanwhile, the city council will spend that time trying to find a solution in a case where both sides say they've already compromised enough. Sandia Dirks, KPBS News.
San Diego County is under a red flag warning tonight for dangerous fire conditions. The alert will remain up through the weekend. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has more on what's causing the extreme weather.
The strongest winds are expected in the mountains, where gusts could reach more than 70 miles per hour. Inland valley winds could peak at 50 miles per hour. Humidity levels are forecast to dip to single digits. The strong Santa Ana is a result of high pressure building over the Colorado region and low pressure hovering along the Southern California coast. Meteorologist Alex Tardy with the National Weather Service says that pressure combination will push air from east to west.
Our problem is we have these big, beautiful mountains and canyons and valleys. That wind gets blocked and it funnels and goes around and goes over those barriers so that our wind gets enhanced.
Tardy says when the wind comes from the desert rather than the ocean, there's no moisture source, and that's why the air is dry. The usual marine layer gets pushed way out to sea.
Then you add the warming. When you bring the air over the mountains, it compresses and it warms. Kind of like you're pumping a basketball, it compresses and it warms. That lowers the humidity even more.
Tardy says this Santa Ana will be weaker than the one that caused the 2007 wildfires, but the risk of fires remains critical. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
The University of San Diego is hosting the Leadership for Peace and Prosperity Conference this week. Peggy Pico tells us more about the three-day summit.
What creates peace? How can we measure it? And what effect does peace versus violence have on our global economy? Here to help answer those questions and more about the role of private business in creating a peaceful and prosperous society is global philanthropist Steve Killalay, founder of the Global Peace Index, and University of San Diego International Business Director and Professor Denise Diamond. Welcome.
Thank you.
Steve, you're a high-tech entrepreneur, a businessman, and a featured speaker at this Peace and Prosperity Summit. How is peace and a country's economy linked?
Well, I think first up, you've got to look at how much does violence and the consequence of violence cost to an economy. So in the US, it's 15% of your GDP, somewhere over $2 trillion. Now, money which you don't have to spend containing violence, you can shift elsewhere, where you get more productive utilisation of the resources and capital.
And basically, when you say it's 15% of our GDP, what are we talking about? What does this cost? Our military? What?
This is a holistic cost, so you'd be looking at things like, let's say, the military, the cost of overseas wars, the death of people in combat, there'd be the injuries from that, it'd be coming back internally, you'd be looking at the judiciary system, the cost of policing, the cost of incarceration. The US has the highest incarceration rates in the world. Then there'd be lost productivity from people who, let's say, die in homicides, then the pain and suffering associated with their families and the lost productivity there, CCTV cameras, insurance, and I could keep going.
You could keep going. When you link peaceful prosperity and commerce, when I've heard what you've said about that, are you talking primarily about local entrepreneurs, businessmen, businesses, or multinational corporations, or all of the above?
Talking all of the above. So you could look at it, let's say, businessmen working at the local level. You could see companies which are working inside a nation. Then you could also look at the multinational companies. Also, there are costs for local government, costs for state government, national governments, then also international bodies, let's say peacekeepers with the UN.
Okay, and moving forward on that, Denise, you have some other speakers at this summit. Who are they and what are they talking about?
Well, as Steve said, violence is not good for business and it's very costly. So what we're doing is we're bringing in business leaders from really around the world that are going to be coming in and speaking what are they doing on the ground so that business can positively contribute towards peace building. Sometimes we don't really associate business with developing peace. We think of governments, multinationals, NGOs, but business have a lot to gain and also can contribute. So we're going to have even some local people from Qualcomm and Sony. They're engaged in extractive industries, and so they want to look at their supply chain. How can they make sure that they're doing responsible extraction? Impact investing, where's our money going? Is it helping develop a more peaceful society? And also other examples where companies are really on the ground helping to create a more peaceful environment so that they can do better in business in those environments.
What is your recommendation for getting businesses involved who aren't involved in peace commerce in this process?
Well, I mean, all business has an investment. Like I said, we don't think it's our responsibility. But when you think about managing and prospering for all of your stakeholders, you're thinking you want to provide and be working in an environment where there isn't a lot of violence. And what can you do to help make an environment so you can be more prosperous for all of your stakeholders?
And Steve, what do you think about that? What are you going to be telling people at the conference as far as businesses getting involved in this peace conference from the point of a commerce perspective?
Well, I think what I'm going to be telling them is that sort of increases in peace increase the size of their markets, increases in peace decrease their cost structures. Therefore, peace is in their best self-interest, and what they need to do is work with governments so that they can get governments to implement the right policies to create an environment, or the attitudes, institutions and structures which sustain a peaceful society.
All right, an interesting perspective. Steve Killalay and Professor Diamond, thanks so much for talking to us about this. And I want to let folks know the Leadership for Peace and Prosperity Conference is at the University of San Diego. It runs from October 3rd through the 5th. It's open to the public starting Friday tomorrow. The details on our website, kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans addicted to painkillers. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
Education reform usually focuses on what happens in the classroom, but some neighbors in Chula Vista decided reforming schools wasn't enough. KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert shows us what it means for Castle Park to become a promise neighborhood.
10-year-old Emily Jimenez Ayon wants to be a doctor. To do that, she knows she'll need to go to college. And to get there, she's willing to make some sacrifices. For the moment, that includes giving up her quinceañera, the equivalent of a coming-out party that many Mexican-American families throw for their daughters' 15th birthdays.
I don't want to have like a 50 years old because I want to save money and for I can go to the university.
That's right. She wants to save the money to go toward college. Her mother, Gladys Ayon, says this is a new outlook for her daughter and her family.
Before, we didn't talk a lot about it, but the people from Promise came with the mentality of helping the mothers from the time they're pregnant and helping them so that their children do well and little by little and get to college.
Castle Park's Promise Neighborhood program is one of about a dozen Promise neighborhoods across the country. The federal government has set aside about $100 million for programs like these over the last 3 years. Last year, a partnership of almost 30 organizations in Castle Park got a $28 million 5-year grant to provide what's being called cradle to career support for the neighborhood's children and families.
We saw a lot of gaps in services, and we saw a lot of what was keeping kids from being successful in school or keeping kids from going to college.
That's Catherine Lembeau. She's CEO of South Bay Community Services, the group leading the Promise neighborhood. She says getting more children to go to college is the goal of the whole effort.
You had parents, 96% of the parents saying they wanted their children to go to college, and they talked to their kids about it, but then when you asked them what they were talking to them about is that we can't afford it. You can't go to college.
But changing that mentality is a tall order in a neighborhood like Castle Park, where English proficiency is low, 2/3 of adults don't have high school diplomas, and more than half of households don't have a full-time breadwinner. Lembeau says that's why they have to start early.
There's an early learning network, and that has to do with preventing any gaps or getting rid of the gaps that kids have even before they enter school.
That network includes a new preschool Lembeau is visiting today on the Castle Park Elementary campus, where students are learning in English and Spanish.
Cuatro.
But it also includes newborn home visits by family clinic doctors that are part of the Promise neighborhood and parenting classes called Universidad de Padres, or Parent University. Gladys Ayon says those classes have given her the tools to get involved with her daughter's education.
This helped me a lot because in my daughter's classroom, everything is in English, and the teacher gives me all the work in Spanish so I can explain it to her. This helped me a lot because now I communicate a lot with the teacher. It helps me a lot with my daughter because I struggled a lot with English.
Ayon is also spending more time on the school's campus, not just in classes, but planting and tending this parent-run garden that was paid for with Promise neighborhood dollars. Evidence of those dollars is everywhere on campus, from in-class and after-school tutors to an after-school computer lab where students can catch up on reading skills. The school's resource teacher, Kim Callado, says the school is also connected with services now that help keep kids in school and learning.
We had a family that needed immediate help with shelter. And so we went through the Promise neighborhood. We asked them if they could do a referral, and they helped them through the whole process.
Those connections have only been in place since school started at the end of July, but Callado says they're starting to pay off.
We're still working on it. We just started, but yes, we've already seen a difference because we're getting so much support on calling parents, asking them why they're absent. So last week we were celebrating that we did really well with our attendance.
But being on campus isn't enough. On a recent afternoon, the Promise neighborhood's promotoras were getting ready to go knocking on doors to recruit for one of their programs.
We can actually invite not just the 55 and older to this one. This workshop, everyone's invited.
Cindy Gonzalez became a promotora after years of volunteering at her son's school, Castle Park Middle, which is also part of the Promise neighborhood.
We are the eyes, the ears, and especially the voice of the community. We're there to inform the community of everything that we're learning, and we're also there to navigate them through all of the programs.
The promotoras are neighborhood residents, so Gonzalez says parents trust them in a way they may not trust school administrators. If parents are more comfortable, they'll open up and let promotoras know what services they may really need. Gonzalez says she's seen firsthand what the influx of support and extended school day programs from the Promise neighborhood can mean for students.
I would hear every morning, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school, and it was a struggle.
But along with Promise Neighborhoods came a new philosophy at her son's middle school.
It holds them accountable for not going to school, for not doing their homework, and he would have to make up his days on Saturdays. I stopped hearing that every morning, I don't want to go to school, because he knew there's consequences.
Now she says her son's in high school outside the neighborhood, but he knows college is in his future. Gonzalez says they're planning for him in ways they didn't for his older sister.
We didn't have all the information. I'm sure the school had it, but it wasn't readily accessible to us at the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got involved also, was because I wanted to share that information with the community also.
When the 5-year grant ends, the schools and organizations will have to find other ways to keep successful programs running. Lembeau says they'll be gauging success in a lot of different ways. They'll be looking at how many infants and toddlers have access to medical care somewhere other than an emergency room. They're asking parents how much they read to young children. They're also tracking things like high school graduation rates, college enrollment, and test scores. But Gonzalez is looking for something else.
I'm hoping that the community wakes up and realizes that they have a voice and that they can make a difference in their communities and their schools for their children.
That kind of change, she thinks, might outlast any program. Kyla Calvert, KPBS News.
We've been telling you about the red flag warning for the Mountain Valley and desert areas, especially tonight, right through the weekend. With Santa Ana winds picking up tonight, as I mentioned, temperatures tomorrow and the next few days in the 80s along the coast, with the inland valleys near 90 with gusty winds, sunny and breezy in the mountains. Temperatures in the 70s there. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds for the desert. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.